Chapter 11. The School Counselor. Over the next few days, Sammy didn't talk with anybody, not even to his friends or his only rival, Spike. He also didn't talk to his mother ever since they had that big argument. He was giving almost everybody the silent treatment. Those around him were so surprised at the way he had changed himself. They all hoped that with a last name like Kind, it would mean that he was always a kind person. But unfortunately, it all became a sad turn of events. Samy told Sammy to go to the elementary school counselor every other day after school, starting the very next day. His counselor had short blonde hair and was wearing thin spectacles with clean lenses. She was in a royal blue modest dress with long sleeves. "Hello," she said with a smile, holding out her hand. Sammy didn't smile back or put his hand out to shake. "I'm Mrs. Oakley," she said, pulling her hand away. "I'm guessing you're Sammy Kind." Sammy gave an angry nod. "I'll be your after-school counselor, and I'll be helping you with your anxiety or whatnot. Will you please come on in?" He followed her inside and saw the office. It had a brown desk with rainbow pictures on the side. There were suns, clouds, rainbows, snowflakes, and wind clouds all over the walls. There was a sign in the middle of the wall in big letters. It said, "Emotions happen, whether or not." In front of the desk was a brown recliner with a headrest at the back of the wall. "Will you please take a seat on that bench, Sam?" asked Mrs. Oakley, while sitting down in her desk chair. Sammy sat down, clenched his fists, and rested his chin on them. "How has your day been?" she asked. Even when she started asking him a few questions about how he's been doing, Sammy just glared into space without a single word. "What's been going on, Sammy?" she asked. Sammy ignored the question the first time. Mrs. Oakley said again, "Sam, I'm asking, is something wrong?" He mumbled. "What was that?" asked Mrs. Oakley. "I don't want to talk about it," he called out angrily, while putting his forearms down to his knees. His backpack and coat fell to the floor. "Sammy," said Mrs. Oakley firmly, "calm down. We need to talk about this. Otherwise, how can I help you? You can't keep being angry forever, because that's not going to help." "I don't think anything can help me," said Sammy softly. "Listen," said Mrs. Oakley. "I need you to tell me what's bothering you so that I can help you. Can we do that, please?" Sammy realized what Mrs. Oakley said was very reasonable, and that he had no other excuse to come up with. "Okay," he said with a sigh. "Thank you," said Mrs. Oakley kindly. So Sammy told her about his dad, and he tried to hold back tears. She wrote up details in her notebook about what Sammy was telling her. For example, she wrote down that he had been certain that what his mom saw on the TV was all just a story about someone else's dad, but it turned out to be his dad and nobody else's. He also told her that he used to love to play in the snow, but ever since he heard about the car accident, he started hating it. Sammy felt like he didn't want to have any more fun, especially in the snow, but mostly, he didn't want to have fun without his dad. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Sammy," said Mrs. Oakley sadly. "But you still have a whole life ahead." "No, I don't, Mrs. Oakley," said Sammy through the tears. He firmly stood up and headed towards the door. "Who's gonna take me camping? Who's gonna play catch with me? Who's gonna ride bikes with me? Who's gonna teach me how to drive a car someday?" "Sammy," said Mrs. Oakley, "your mom can do all those things with you too." But my dad would do much more than my mom would. She's always too busy working. Oh, I see, said Mrs. Oakley. Mrs. Oakley, I'm begging you, he bargained. I'll give you my Game Boy, my Winnie the Pooh bear, and even my piggy bank. If you take those, can you promise me that my dad will come back? I know you are willing to give up everything you have just for your dad, said Mrs. Oakley with a sigh. But Sammy, you need to understand that no matter what you do, it's never going to bring him back. My mom could probably give you $1 million if you can at least try, pleaded Sammy with his lips trembling. I can't promise that, Sammy, she said humbly. I'm sorry. His nose started to run. He ducked his head and slipped out the door. He softly closed the door behind him. Tears started to fall again as he stumbled away from the office in despair. It's all over, thought Sammy, wetting his coat with his tears. If my dad's really gone, so is my kindness and happiness.